In today's video, this is going to be a theory talking about the Clara Dolls. So the Clara Dolls, Homura's witch familiars in Rebellion, are incredibly fascinating, both symbolically and narratively. They are manifestations of Homura's inner psyche, reflecting fragmented pieces of her emotions, insecurities, and suppressed feelings. Their name, the Clara Dolls, even invokes the idea of fragile, doll-like figures, delicate but eerie, perfectly fitting for the aesthetic of Madoka Magica. Now let's explain a bit more about what are the Clara Dolls. In the Rebellion movie, the Clara Dolls are playful, chaotic, and mischievous little things who seem to operate both as comic relief and as a sinister undertone to Homura's descent into darkness. They resemble puppets, hinting at Homura's struggle with control, not just over others, but over herself. Their appearances often mirrored Homura's shifting mental state throughout the film. Each Clara doll seems to represent different emotional fragments. There are some that represent insecurity and doubt. They constantly mock and tease, reflecting the nagging voices in Homura's head that question her worth and her choices. They also represent resentment and jealousy. Their antics often carry a dark edge, hinting at Homura's buried feelings of bitterness toward the circumstances she's been forced to endure. They also tend to have childlike innocence that's been lost. Despite their mischief, there's an almost sad, childlike quality to them, representing the innocence Homura has long since sacrificed in her quest to save Madoka. Now let's talk a little about the tomato scene, which I theorize represents a hidden rebellion, which is going to set the stage for today's theory. At the end of Rebellion, when the Clara Dolls throw tomatoes at Homura, it's easy to dismiss it as just a quirky, humorous moment, but considering how symbolic everything in Madoka Magica is, this could represent something deeper. Tomatoes represent a symbol. Tomatoes have often been associated with mockery in performance contexts, like with audiences who would throw them at bad performances in old theater traditions. Here, the Clara Dolls might be judging Homura for her actions, her choice to rewrite reality and essentially imprison Madoka within a world of her own making. They also represent an internal rebellion. The Clara Dolls are Homura's own creations tied to her subconscious. Their rebellion hints at an internal conflict, a part of Homura that knows what she did was wrong. They mock her because deep down she mocks herself for her own selfishness. Now, the theory that we're going to be focusing on in today's video is, what if the Clara Dolls actually turned against Homura? If the Clara Dolls had fully turned against Homura, it would be like her own mind betraying her. Think of it as an emotional uprising. The Clara Dolls turning on Homura would represent a loss of control. Homura thrives on control, whether it's controlling time, reality, or even her own emotions. If the Clara Dolls rebelled, she'd lose her grip not just on her external world, but on her internal one as well. It could cause a breakdown or even push her into becoming an even darker witch-like entity. A rebellion from the Clara Dolls would symbolize Homura's suppressed guilt, manifesting into something she can't control. They'd be like little voices screaming, "You can't escape the truth of what you've done." In a Madoka Magica sequel, which during the time of this recording has not been released yet, wink wink, I know we're all waiting for the fourth movie, it hasn't been released yet, but in a Madoka Magica sequel, a Clara Doll rebellion would be the perfect catalyst for Homura's next downfall or her redemption. I actually predict that that's going to be part of what happens in the fourth movie, by the way. Maybe they'd force her to confront her guilt head on, leading her to either accept what she's become or break under the weight of her own self-loathing. What do you guys think? Do you see the Clara Dolls as potential saviors for Homura's soul? or the final nail in her emotional coffin? I'm curious to know what you think. Now the question is, what would happen if the Clara Dolls actually turned against Homura, and how could it affect the story and characters in Madoka Magica? What if the Clara Dolls weren't just mischievous familiars, but latent seeds of rebellion planted within Homura's own psyche? As manifestations of her fragmented mind, her guilt, obsession, and despair, they could eventually grow strong enough to oppose her, becoming both her downfall and possibly the key to her redemption. At first, it would start out very subtle. The Clara Dolls, always chaotic, would grow slightly more defiant. Their jokes would have sharper edges. They'd mock her choices, not just playfully, but with venom hidden beneath. Homura would dismiss it as mere quirks, but beneath the surface, they'd be evolving, fueled by cracks in her emotional armor. Since they're tied to her subconscious, the Clara Dolls wouldn't just fight her physically, they'd attack her mentally. They would manipulate her memories, twist her perceptions, and make her doubt the very reality she created as Devil Homura. Imagine Homura slowly losing her grip, seeing distorted versions of Madoka that whisper, "Was this really what you wanted?" Eventually, their rebellion would trigger Homura's descent into an even deeper witch form, a transformation beyond her current devil status. They'd force her into confronting the emotions that she's buried, the guilt over stealing Madoka's godhood, loneliness masked by control, and the fear of being unloved. Madoka, now trapped in the world Homura created, would feel the ripple effects. She might regain fragments of her divine memories, realizing that something's wrong with Homura, not just externally, but internally. This could create a dynamic where Madoka isn't just the damsel in Homura's story, but the one trying to save Homura from herself, which I predict could very well be the plotline in the fourth movie. Hopefully this ages well and I'm not wrong. The Clara Dolls' rebellion could create chaos in reality, forcing Sayaka and Kyoko to confront Homura again. But this time, instead of fighting her as an enemy, they faced a terrifying question. Can Homura even be saved anymore? Sayaka, ever the moral compass, might clash with Kyoko about whether they should try to save Homura or put her down for good. The Clara Dolls could expose a horrifying truth. Witches aren't just corrupted magical girls. They're living emotional paradoxes capable of evolving, changing, and even rebelling against their own creators. This would flip the entire concept of witches on its head. Now, would all of this lead to Homura's redemption, or would it lead to her downfall? If this were to lead to her redemption, the Clara Dolls force Homura to truly confront her feelings, not just for Madoka, but for herself. In her darkest moment, maybe Madoka reaches out, not as a god, not as a concept, but as a friend who loves her, flaws and all. That could be the light Homura needs to heal. Now, if this were to lead to her end, the Clara Dolls could succeed in breaking Homura's mind entirely. She dissolves into her witch form, beyond saving. Ironically, the very fragments of her mind meant to serve her become the architects of her doom. It's poetic. She tried to control everything, but in the end, she couldn't even control herself. Another thought is that the Clara Dolls could represent the idea that the greatest enemy isn't the world, Kyubey, or even Madoka. It's ourselves. They could be Homura's downfall or her salvation, depending on whether she can finally face the truth she's been running from across countless timelines. What do you think of that? Could you ever see Homura accepting help? Or do you feel like her stubbornness would be her undoing? I personally have a theory related to the idea of Homura getting help in the form of Sayaka. I've always have loved the concept of Sayaka becoming Homura's Dark Knight, which I always felt was very fascinating because it flips the dynamic we've always seen between them. Instead of being ideological opposites, they become reluctant allies, bonded by distorted memories, false peace, and ironically their mutual connection to Madoka. I've always loved the idea of Devil Homura and Sayaka being partners. I've made lots of videos about it. I even shouted out a Madoka blogger by the name of Warrior KK back in the day. She's what inspired this pairing and this love of Devil Homura and Sayaka being a thing. I just wanted to throw that out there. Now here's how I see things playing out. The Dark Knight, aka Sayaka, as Homura's tragic ally. Homura, desperate to maintain control over her fabricated universe, realizes that Sayaka is one of the few people who could destabilize it. Sayaka is emotional, righteous, and stubborn, the perfect threat to Devil Homura's fragile utopia. So instead of fighting her, Homura rewrites Sayaka's memories, removing the burdens of her past. No grief over Kyosuke, and no regrets about becoming a magical girl, and no memory of Madoka's sacrifice. Instead, she's filled with gratitude towards Homura, believing that this world is a gift Homura gave her out of kindness. With her heroic instincts intact, but her history erased, Sayaka becomes Homura's most loyal enforcer, a dark knight, tasked with protecting the peace of the world. She's the perfect soldier, strong, passionate, and unflinchingly loyal to the one person she believes saved her. This dynamic is rich with irony. Sayaka's core identity revolves around fighting for justice, but now she's unknowingly upholding a lie. She's a knight fighting for a queen who embodies everything she used to despise: manipulation, control, and emotional repression. The Clara Dolls, representing fragments of Homura's subconscious, would be the cracks in this fragile illusion. They taunt Sayaka, drop cryptic comments, and plant doubts. I can imagine the Clara Dolls saying, "Isn't it strange how perfect everything feels?" Or perhaps they may say, "Funny how you can't remember who Madoka really was." And then they could also mention to Sayaka, "Isn't protecting this world just going through the motions?" Sayaka, despite the brainwashing, is inherently stubborn. I can imagine that flicker of doubt growing. Her soul gem, even in this false peace, starts to darken, not from despair, but from cognitive dissonance. She senses something is wrong, but can't pinpoint what. The ultimate conflict would be between Sayaka and Homura, not as enemies, but as two people grappling with the truth. Maybe Sayaka finds an old relic, a violin, a letter, or even a glimpse of Madoka's true form that shatters the illusion. Imagine the heartbreak of realizing that she fought for a lie and protected the very thing that imprisoned Sayaka in the first place. If Sayaka were to come to this realization, it would parallel Sayaka's original fall into despair, but this time, instead of succumbing to it, she channels that pain into defiance, becoming the very force that challenges Homura's godhood. Now, why would this work? For Homura, it shows how her need for control leads to self-destruction. The person she saved becomes her greatest opposition, not out of hate, but because Sayaka embodies the very thing Homura fears, the truth. For Sayaka, it's a redemption arc. In the original series, her despair consumed her. Here, she faces despair again, but rises above it, proving she's more than her mistakes. But what do you think? What would happen next? Would Sayaka be able to defeat Homura? And what role would the Clara Dolls play if this conflict were to occur? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and give me your theories about how the rest of this theory would play out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell for more deep dives into Madoka Magica theories. I'll see you next time.